right, what do we have on the bench here? We got alternators, we got fuel filters, we got acid, we got cats. We're either working on a boat motor or going to jail, I don't know. Back in 2017, I began a full restoration of my 96 Bayliner by tearing it apart all the way down to the hull. From there, I began the rebuilding process, which included learning to fiberglass, rebuilding an engine and outdrive, learning to fair and paint, and even upholstery. Now, I've bought a 28-foot cabin cruiser, and I'm starting all over. Welcome, my name's Jared. Now get ready, because it's going to be a ship show. Alright, let's get some of this stuff cleared out of the way, and I think the first thing we're going to jump into here is alternator, because that's pretty straightforward. So, this is the alternator that was on the motor. As far as I know, there's nothing wrong with it. It sounds fine, it spins well. I didn't test it, but my OCD got the best of me, and everything else on the motor was looking really clean, and I didn't like the way this looked. And doing a little bit of future planning, I'm contemplating ditching the genset and moving towards a battery inverter type of setup. Still undecided on that, but either way, I'd like the idea of a high output alternator. So, you probably can't see that. You're like, why is this hanging in the air? Well, I was painting it. Should be dry now, but this is a high output alternator. It is from DB Electrical. I'll put a link to that in the description. Now that we got this thing painted up and looking good, paint's had plenty of time to cure, let's slap that on there. All right, so the alternator is now on, and it is now time to get you guys up to speed on the Cool Fuel modules. So, for those of you that are not familiar with the Cool Fuel Gen 3 modules, they are a bit of a problem, a known problem. So, the problem with these is twofold, actually. The original design, let me grab the part. Okay, so the original design had these cooling hoses that go into the side of it, and they are pressed onto these fittings that have basically O-rings or gaskets on them, and this stupid captive nut in the middle. So what happens is this one's all bent up, it's all jacked, so when you thread this onto the side of the Cool Fuel module, it draws this in and in theory pushes these fittings into the housing and seals around here. And these are notorious for leaking and breaking and just being all around bad. Mercruiser has since done away with this design and just gone to a regular threaded hose fitting, which threads into the side. The problem is you need the new style body to put those threaded fittings in, blah, 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 blah. The other issue with Cool Fuel modules is when they first came out, they painted the cap and the inside of the body where the fuel is. And with ethanol and fuel, ethanol eventually will eat away at the paint and cause those paint flakes that are after the filter to get pumped up into the fuel pressure regulator, inevitably into your fuel rail, and clog your fuel injectors. It's a whole thing. So what I have here on the bench are two Cool Fuel modules. I only have one motor, I have two here. So what is going on is this is the original out of the boat. And as you can see, this is painted. This is the first generation Gen 3 Cool Fuel module. I know it's confusing, but there's like two versions of it. The first one is the problem one, which I have. A painted top cap, and these bosses here are where this goes into there. So my initial plan was there is a company called S&J Marine or S&J Performance Marine that remanufactures these top caps, gets rid of the plating and anodizes them. So that kind of solves the paint issue. So my initial plan was to just get the top cap replaced, But as I was taking this off the boat, I had a really hard time getting the fuel input line, the fuel output, like the hard line out of this, which comes in here. So I actually ended up putting it up in my vise, and I went to clamp it gently. And as I looked down, I realized the side of this over here was like way bowed out. And I started looking closer and realized that there is a absolutely gigantic crack running down the side of the body of this. So this was never winterized completely. Somebody, or the previous owner, must have left some water in here. It expanded, cracked the housing. Now this entire housing is no good. So I had to find a new housing in addition to everything else. So I started hitting the Google machine up and kind of rolled the dice a little bit, but I found one on eBay. There was a seller, I actually had 2 of these for sale. I bought one off of them. This is the second version of the Gen 3 Cool Fuel module, which has the anodized top cap and the threaded fittings. Oop, that's not the threaded fittings. That's where the drain plugs go. Threaded fittings are over here. But one thing I ran into is this thing was pretty gross in the water, in the coolant area. So both of these fittings just completely shattered when I tried to take them off, and these were like clogged solid. So I got in there and started cleaning things out, but that's about as far as I got with this thing. Now that we have the history out of the way, let's backtrack a little bit to several weeks ago when I actually removed this from the boat and show you how I did that, and then we'll come back here and pick up from where we are. All right, welcome back. Now that you saw how much fun it was to remove that from the boat, let's get into breaking the 2 of these things down and seeing if there's salvageable components from either. This one's relatively clean, but I don't know what to expect when I get inside of it. This one was pretty gross, but newer, so who knows. So I'm gonna start actually with the original unit from the boat and see what we're dealing with. If I'm not mistaken, I've already sort of loosened these bolts. Yeah. Okay, so the first thing I'm noticing is there really is no paint down inside of here, which is kind of concerning in that at one point I believe this was painted and it's not there anymore. But the potential silver lining is this screen right here on the fuel pressure regulator. That's usually what's clogged up with paint. So the fact that it's not is making me feel a little bit better. There is some like kind of black residue around here that I don't know if that's paint. So, all right, now let's keep diving into it. Ooh, that is some stale fuel. Okay, so this is actually really good news. This probably isn't going to show up well on camera, but the inside of this has all of the paint still. It's actually just starting to bubble in certain areas. Let me actually see if I can show you that. Actually, hold on. Let me try and get this pump out first. So again, this might be hard to see, but all of the paint in there is actually still in there. Again, it's starting to bubble, so I obviously kind of caught this in time, and I'm not going to reuse this because obviously that would defeat the purpose. The paint eventually will flake off and get clogged in the system. But the reason that that's really good news is that means that my injectors and fuel rail are probably okay. That none of that paint migrated up to that point. Whew, thank goodness. So you might be wondering why I'm being so careful and gentle taking this one apart when it's broken, but in all reality, I don't know what's going to happen with this one when I take it apart. If I break any pieces, it's going to be good to have extras to go in. So it really sucks that this one's broken because it's actually very clean inside. But it's okay because upgrading to these threaded ports is a good change to make anyway, so at the end of the day, it's all right. Okay. You know what? Let's take the fuel fitting out and then we'll be done with this one. Now we're done with this guy. Let's get out of the way. All right, so at this point, I'm gonna repeat all that with this one and then we'll come back to it, see where we're at. All right, we got it apart. The second one, that is. And I'm gonna count my blessings where I can get them. This boat, seems like every corner I turn I'm spending money, but, well, I guess I did on this. This used one was like $500, so I guess I'm not escaping this one either, but at least everything looks good. So I was really happy the fuel pressure regulator came out like super clean, no debris in there. Even like the O-ring looks like damn near brand new. The top cap, everything inside looks like pristine. Nothing weird going on in there. A little bit of gunk will clean up on the fuel pumps before I put it back together, but all in all, happy with that. The fuel filter housing came apart, no issues. Even the filter itself doesn't look too bad. Obviously, you're going to replace it. The pre-filter was kind of gross. Not sure what the deal is with that. There's a chunk of something in there, but replacing that as well, so not worried about it. So at this point, there's a little bit of debris down the bottom of here. I'm going to give these things a good cleaning. I'm going to reassemble it. I do have a new fuel filter kit here from S&J Performance Marine. It's the same company I talked about before that does the remanufactured parts for this. They also sell a 10 micron filter for this, which is actually slightly better than the Mercruiser OEM. 99% of the time, I'm camp OEM Mercruiser parts, wherever it makes sense. Obviously, there's a couple exceptions to that. This is one case where this guy that has this company made a better filter, has all the test data on his website that kind of proves it. So knowing what's potentially in my tank, having sat that long and all the other crap going on, I want a good filter in here at least to start. So that's what I got. Plus he sells the kit with the pre-filter. So it's kind of nice. You get all of those and the gasket. So it's kind of cool that it comes in like one kit. So I'm going to get the stuff cleaned up and then we'll start reassembling this. The good news is I don't need to reuse anything from that old one. So I'm going to keep the good stuff out of that as spare parts. All right, let's get this thing cleaned up. All right, we are back a couple days later actually, but I got this guy cleaned up nice and I actually sanded it down. There's a couple bare spots, so gave it a good coat of self-etching primer and some paint. So got this looking good. Now don't freak out, I'm saying paint after I just complained about paint on these things, but only on the outside. I didn't paint the inside, so don't worry. Now, there are a couple things that I forgot to mention that are issues with these, and that might explain this ridiculous looking setup here. So what I have here is a 3/8 NPT plug in the top port and a fitting kind of thing going on here with a gauge. And what I'm going to do is actually put in 5 to 10 psi of pressure in the cooling jacket, and I'm going to pressure test this and make sure there's no leaks. There is a issue with these where there's I think a casting flaw, where somewhere down in here you can potentially get a leak and you'll end up getting water in your fuel, which obviously is no good. So what I'm going to do is pressurize this 5-10 psi, somewhere around there, and then for one, just look for any major pressure drops or any leaks, and then if I don't see anything here like major, I'm going to go around with a spray bottle and look for any bubbles in the areas that potentially could be an issue. So let's get to it. So right now I got just above 7 psi. The good news is I don't hear any major leaks. All right, so there's actually a slow leak coming from this fitting down here, so let me see if I can tighten that up. Okay, so with that slow leak that I think I fixed, it had dropped like just below 7, so I'm gonna let this sit for like 30 minutes, come back and check it, and if it hasn't really moved, then we should be good to keep going. All right, so pressure test went good. Moving on to the next step, which is another problem with these modules. A little bit less discussed, but I'm gonna see if I can zoom in on here with some light. If you look down in that top cooling port, you can see like half of that opening is blocked by the casting, and there's an embossment in there that's blocking it that is actually for that screw hole there. So what my plan is to drill out this hole a little bit to remove the bottom of that embossment. The issue there is if I drill out the bottom of that embossment, the threaded hole for this screw that would go in here may actually go all the way through into the water jacket at that point, which obviously could be a problem because then water could leak out this threaded hole. So what I did is actually bought a stainless steel cap screw, put it in here with Loctite to seal it and to keep it from turning. I'm going to cut the head off of this basically and turn it into a stud. And I should be able to open up this passage. Now, to avoid messing up those threads horribly when I do this, what I figured out is, let me put you back on the stand. So what I figured out is a 3/8 inch brass pipe nipple fits perfectly with a 1/2 inch drill. So I'm going to use that as a bushing for really two purposes here. One, it's going to protect the threads so the drill doesn't actually damage the threads. And it's also going to act as a bushing to make sure I drill straight and don't potentially wander off and drill into the fuel passage. So I'm going to clench my cheeks and do this, and hopefully all goes well. Alright, so currently, minus the slow drip here, what I'm doing is I have two hoses running through the cooling passages down to a little pump, and it is recirculating phosphoric acid right now because the inside of the cooling jackets were kind of gross, so I'm trying to clean those out, so we'll see how that goes and show you. Is the fuel module ready to go back together?
The what?
Cool fuel module.
What is that?
What I'm working on.
Sure?
Okay. Alright, you heard her. It's time to put it back together. Alright, so I got the coolant passages flushed out with phosphoric acid. All the threads have been kind of retapped, get any paint out of them and stuff like that. I think we're ready to put it back together, so I'm going to start with the updated waterline fittings. So these are the barb fittings that are threaded that replace this old disaster. To seal these, I believe the book calls for Permatex number 2, which I have here. This is what I tend to use on threaded fittings, so that's what I'm going to go with. Alright, threaded fittings are in, so let's spin it around, and we just need to put in the blue drain plug. Now this one has an O-ring, so I'm not so worried about sealing with this one as I am being able to get it out in the future. These have a tendency to get stuck when corrosion builds up in there, so in order to keep that corrosion out, I'm going to use good old aviation Forma gasket. Just like the Permatex number 2, this is a non-hardening sealant. This is basically just to help keep water off of the threads, because where water gets into the threads, the aluminum will actually corrode and expand, and that's kind of what locks these in place and makes them snap off so easily. This is just one extra step to help make sure you can get it off in the future. I may upgrade in the long run to Hardened Marine, make stainless versions of these. I think what we're going to do next is get the pumps installed. So here are the pumps out of the newer unit. It has a sock on it, which the old one didn't have, I don't believe, so I do like that it has the extra level of filtering. So I do need to get this gasket out of here. I bought a replacement for that. Okay, and the gasket has little bumps on it to help kind of press it in place. Okay, now before I do that, I don't know if this is a good idea or not, but let me show you. So on the bottom of the pumps, there is actually a rubber sort of ring here that the pump it's like an isolation damper. So this actually presses down into the inside of this, and it's kind of tight for the pump to go in there. So I think I'm going to press this into the housing and then lubricate this with some 2-cycle engine oil. My thought there is obviously it's meant to mix with gas, so it shouldn't cause a future problem. And it's only going to be a tiny little bit anyway, but of all the options, this seemed like a good one. All right, that wasn't fun, but we got it. So not sure if you can see in there at all, but it's that rubber thing down there. So now I'm going to do the little dab of 2-cycle oil. Here we go. Okay, that went in nice and easy. And now we're back to just the old trusted aviation gasket sealer for the bolts. So we're just going to hand tighten these at first, and then I'll look up the torque spec on these. All right. Top cover screws get tightened to 124 inch-pounds. That actually seems like a lot for an M6. You know, honestly, I'm going to go to like 80 and see what that feels like. 124 seems ridiculous. I don't want to break these screws off. Okay, that's 80. I know this is not good practice to be doing this by feel, but all right, let's go with 100. Torque down. All right, same torque for the fuel pressure regulator. Okay, now this gets placed in oriented with the hose barb facing towards me, so water line's going out to the left. So this way. Where are my screws? Okay. And you know the drill. Last couple steps are going to be the fuel filter, which we got here. So I'm going to do the same thing. Just a little bit on the rubber parts. Okay. Got the pre-filter. This goes down in first. This just gets pressed down to the bottom, so. Now for the gaskets, the O-ring goes on the top cap. I'll roll it on, being careful not to break it. Okay. And then this ring here goes on this. Carefully put it on the right orientation, which sort of has this flange kind of angled up, if that makes sense. Quick coat of Earl, and same on the O-ring. Now these get twisted together, it's kind of a twist lock sort of fitting. Okay, let's drop this in place. Slides in nice and easy. Nice. Just tighten these down to, let me guess, 124 inch-pounds. 53 inch-pounds. All right, I think the only thing left is just the fuel fitting. Cool. Which, this is the case where you really want to use the Permatex #2 and not, I mean, you can use Teflon tape, but just be careful of what you do use because it has to be fuel resistant, which this is. Okay, I believe that's the angle it was at before. Holy crap, I think that's it. Let's get it back on the motor. All right, let's see if we can do this. Sweet, that was easy. All right, guys, that's gonna do it for this video. That's getting to be about way too long. Unfortunately, we're not gonna get to the heat exchangers on this one, but we'll tackle that in the next video. Anyway, yeah, that's gonna do it for this one. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe if you're not already. And if you have any questions or comments, leave them down below. I'll try to answer as many as I can. Otherwise, yeah, that's gonna do it. We'll see you on the next one. Bye.